Hello and warm welcome to our virtual event focusing on the Africa Human Capital Plan and why investing in women and girls matters now more than ever as we deal with the impacts of the COVID pandemic. My name is Nayeba Chili.
And I am Edith Jibuno. Welcome. Naye and I are both External Affairs Managers in the Africa region of the World Bank. And we are delighted to be your host for the next couple of hours as we navigate through testimonies and insights showcasing why empowering women and girls is so important now.
Indeed, Edith, the COVID-19 pandemic has brought devastating havoc to people around the world. In addition to the economic fallout, disruptions to access to health services and schools have negative effects, particularly on women and girls that could last decades. School closures are causing losses in learning and an increase in permanent school dropouts. 2.6 million African girls are at risk of not returning to schools.
There are losses in income. Informal workers, who are mostly women in the region, lost about 81% of their income during the first month of the pandemic. There is also an increase in gender-based violence. We could go on, but the signs are clear. The need for action is urgent.
What actions, you might ask? In the next hour or so, we will hear from leaders and experts, and most importantly, from women and girls. They will share their experience and expertise on why protecting and advancing women and girls' social and economic empowerment in the immediate and long-term matters now more than ever.
We have an incredible lineup of speakers who can help us understand some of the challenges and solutions. Before we introduce our first guest, let me remind you of the many ways you can engage during this event. First, we are streaming the event in English and French on World Bank Live. You can engage in the conversations online using the hashtag #InvestInPeople. We would also like to know your response to the question posed on the World Bank Live page, on which action you think will be the most important to advance women and girls' empowerment in Sub-Saharan Africa. We will share the results live at the end of the event.
Looking forward to it, Edith. Now let me introduce Axel von Trossenberg, World Bank Group Managing Director for Operations, who will kick us off with his welcoming remarks.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Let me first take this opportunity to thank you for your incredible hard work and commitment during these very difficult COVID times. You're making a real difference and doing a fantastic job. So I'm really pleased to join you today and briefly talk about a key development challenge. Women and girls have been hit hardest and disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. Among the 15-plus age group, it is estimated that 132 million women in the Africa region will be living below the international poverty line with less than $190 a day in 2021. Secondly, in terms of health services, millions of women and girls don't have adequate access to reproductive, maternal, and child health services. And let's turn to education. The COVID crisis has forced many schools to close. Many girls have to stay at home, and there is a real risk that many of them will not return to school once they open. Unfortunately, we have also seen a tremendous increase in gender-based violence. For this reason, I'm so happy that we have this discussion today. I encourage to have a very open discussion, but not a discussion for discussion's sake. We need to discuss what the World Bank can contribute in terms of action, in terms of dialogue, but also in terms of advocacy, particularly against gender-based violence. Come up with an action plan and let's implement it, because that is what the countries, what women and girls expect from us. Wishing you all the best in this discussion, and let's act together forcefully, strongly, and in solidarity with all the women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you, Axel, for those important remarks.
Today, 32 African countries have joined the Human Capital Project, a global effort to accelerate more and better investment in people and enable them to be more productive members of society for greater equity and economic growth. These countries are united in their desire to build human capital for Africa's future. Over the past few years, many of these countries have made considerable progress addressing a range of outcomes that increase women's and girls' empowerment. Sadly, the COVID-19 pandemic threatens to wipe out these gains. But we have an opportunity, even within this crisis, to move on fast on to the necessary reforms and investment that will be crucial for long-term development, particularly for gender equality and empowerment. Without a doubt, decisive development support and global coordination is critical for sustainable and inclusive recovery. Which brings me to our first panel discussion. I'm very much delighted to introduce you to our first panel, made up of women, strong, powerful role model, I must say, who bring a wealth of professional and personal experience to our topic on why investing in women and girls matters now more than ever. It is my privilege to introduce Phumzile Mlabo-Zunka, Executive Director of UN Women. A warm welcome to you, Madam. We are also honored to have Henrietta Fore, Executive Director of UNICEF. Thank you, Madam, for joining. And our very own Mary Pangetstu, Managing Director of Development Policy and Partnership at the World Bank, is here with us too. Welcome, Mary. Glad to have you here with us. Unfortunately, Dr. Natalia Kanem, the UN's Under-Secretary General and Executive Director at the United Nations Population Fund, cannot join us today as initially planned. But she has, however, sent a message because the issue is so important to her. Let's take a listen.
Investing in women and girls matters now more than ever. High time to keep our promise to put women and girls right at the heart of the human capital agenda. Every woman and girl deserves a chance to stay healthy and safe, to secure a prosperous future. Imagine a girl. She's 12 years old, loves school, dreams of graduation, decent work, and a family when she's ready. Today, her hope is fading. Out of school now, with adults jobless due to the pandemic, many nights she goes to bed hungry. What she doesn't suspect yet, has no idea, she might never go back to school. She's to be married off against her will to a much older neighbor to lessen the economic burden at home. All too soon, she's pregnant, trapped in merciless poverty that jeopardizes her health and threatens family well-being into coming generations. Together, let's act decisively to flip the script by 2030, even with COVID, for communities to prosper, invest in adolescent girls' health and education, and invest in family planning. UNFPA stands up for reproductive health and rights for women and girls, for bodily autonomy, access to contraception, and for peace in the home. I ask you to invest to safeguard women and adolescent girls' reproductive rights and choices. It's a smart investment that's proven to yield manifold returns for countries and for her.
Thank you, Dr. Kanem, for kicking off our discussion. Let's jump right into it. Mary, we will hear during the course of our event today how the COVID crisis threatened to erase decades of economic progress and poverty reduction, and how the crisis has a disproportionate impact on women and girls. From where you sit now as Managing Director for Development Policy and Partnership, and from your vast breadth of development experience, what realistically can the development community do to ensure that there is a gender perspective in the design of policies and programs responding to COVID relief?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I think empowering women and girls everywhere, and especially in Africa, is even more critical in the context of COVID-19. As you mentioned, the impact of the pandemic has been had a differential impact on women. And therefore, the pandemic is further exacerbating the existing gender inequalities. So therefore, in designing our response program, our recovery programs, it is really important for us to ensure that we protect women and girls who are disproportionately impacted. And this can be done by improving on targeted economic recovery, social protection measures. I remember when I was a policymaker, when we were doing social protection, like cash for work program, a lot of them was infrastructure related, which were not really for women. So you have to redesign your programs to make sure that they take into account women. And then programs on easy access to health and education services, especially taking advantage of digital platforms to reach women and girls, not just in urban areas, but also in rural communities. So we really need a comprehensive and coordinated response by development partners, governments, and regional institutions. So for instance, first of all, addressing the increase in female poverty. It's estimated that 132 million women in the region will be living below the international poverty line with less than $1.90 a day in 2021. Second, we have to tackle the extensive disruptions in essential health services, especially in reproductive, maternal, and children's access to essential health services. We need to address the losses in learning due to school closures. A total of 2.6 million girls are not expected to return to the classroom. And we should not repeat what happened after the Ebola crisis, as we recall that more girls were likely to not return to school compared to boys. We really should avoid that. And I think finally, in the way we design our social protection programs, including food and cash for work programs, as I mentioned earlier, we really need to make sure that the issue of women is taken care of. Our household surveys actually show that because of the drop in income, people are eating less, and women are likely to be the ones that eat less because they give for their family. So whenever we have such programs, such as food assistance program, we must make sure that it is also having a gender lens. So I really think, having our programs be very mindful of this differential impact and protecting women and girls will be crucial moving forward if we are not going to have greater losses in human capital that is coming from the gender perspective.
Thank you so very much, Mary, for this insight. Phumzile, we know that targeted investments are not only crucial to mitigate the pandemic's disproportionate and negative impact on women, but also to increase resilience to future shocks. From where you stand, what would these look like? What policy recommendations should drive these? And what specific measures can be implemented as part of economic recovery efforts to ensure a more equal and stable economy and society?
The policy interventions that I would like to see at this time when there are fiscal stimulus being decided by government is to have a provision for fiscal stimulus that are designed and targeted to women, and targeted to women where they are. Women in the informal sector, they should be fiscal interventions that are targeted to those women. Women in the service sector, we should have policies that change the informality of the contracts, the unenforceability of the contracts that women, for instance, in the hospitality sector tend to have, so that now and in the future, women will not find themselves in a place where they cannot be covered by labor laws. And of course, the development, international finance institutions are very critical because they play a significant role in the provision of the fiscal stimulus. I would like to see that they provide with this fiscal stimulus with clear stipulation about what should happen to women, and that they should monitor and they should make sure that they engage with civil society and other stakeholders who can assist to make monitoring effective. The fact that the pandemic is hitting women and girls disproportionately is not in dispute. But the fact that women and girls are not getting the investments that are proportional to the suffering that they're being experienced is a big problem. And this is what we need to fix. You don't hear policymakers and those who allocate resources talking about the specific interventions for women when we are talking resources and money. We therefore need to put in the talking points, in the narrative, in the policy, a message that ensures that we are indeed targeting women. Otherwise, we are definitely leaving women behind. They will never go back to the pre-pandemic economic activity. And what we really want is not just going back to pre-pandemic economic activity, is to fix even what was wrong in the pre-pandemic period, so that when they go forward to a better future, not to a future which still carries the problems that were there before the pandemic. And lastly, girls' education is also hard hit by the pandemic. Girls are being married off early against their will in large numbers, unwanted pregnancies, and all of that also has to be addressed. The girls must go back to school even when they've been pregnant. Girls who are staying at home must be brought back into the school system. And we must make sure that we avoid by all costs to have another lost generation. It's much harder to fix a girl who has dropped out of school. They should not drop out of school because a girl is only 13 once. If you don't get what a 13-year-old is supposed to get when she is 13, she will never be 13 again. Something is lost, which may be difficult to ever regain again. So let's work fast and let's make sure that we don't have too many girls slipping out and missing on both education and a brighter future. Thank you.
Henrietta, the International Finance Corporation, IFC, estimates 230 million jobs across Africa alone will need some level of digital skills by 2030. As the financial fallout of this crisis continues, bridging the gender divide gaps can help to drive countries' economic recovery. How is UNICEF working to transform the current crisis into an opportunity to prepare women and girls in Africa for success in an increasingly digitized world?
Thank you very much, Naye. And that number that you give to us, 230 million, is indeed a whole worldwide challenge, but it's an opportunity for girls and women. So thank you for asking. Jobs are becoming increasingly digitized, more remote, more automated, and digital skills are going to be important for all young people in all areas of endeavor. So we do not want girls to miss out on this, just what Phumzile and Mari were talking about. We need to urgently and to intentionally close the gender gaps when it comes to equality of access to education, to skills, and to training. The gaps are wide. In low and middle income countries, women are 20% less likely than men to own a smartphone. And the percentage of females in science, technology, engineering, and math, what we call STEM, is below 15% in over 2/3 of the country for those that graduate in those STEM disciplines. So that's a very low number. Even in the middle and higher income countries, only 14% of the girls who were top performers in science and mathematics are expected to work in science and engineering, compared to 26% of the boys. In order to turn this around and support female talent, all global stakeholders, including philanthropic entities, governments, and investors, need to develop bold strategies to create greater scale and impact. We need all of Mari Pangestu's multi-sectoral approaches to human capital. We also need all of Phumzile's ideas on good paid work for women, because pre-pandemic was never good enough. We need to reskill adult women so they have digital skills. We need to skill and upskill today's generation of girls. So to achieve this, to your point, Naye, UNICEF is working alongside our sister agencies and the Gates Foundation to bring more public and private support to this challenge. One of the goals of Generation Equality platform is to close the gender digital divide. UNICEF is one of the 15 leaders, including global tech companies, large philanthropies, and grassroots digital organizations, working to identify game-changing solutions for girls and women. One idea with big promise is blended financing to gather more capital and help design solutions that can close the digital skills gap for young women. And this approach is being used in the Moringa School in Kenya and in Rwanda. Using a blend of public and philanthropic financing, the school has developed a tailored curriculum for young adult students, both in the classroom but also online. It combines skills in software development and data science with essential transferable skills at work. And best of all, it has a 90% job placement rate for predominantly female graduates. It's a bold example of what's possible if we support the next generation of tech leaders. So now is the time to reimagine a world of opportunity for this generation of girls and young women. Let's make sure they get the support they need. Thank you, Naye.
With just a few minutes left, one final question. What commitment can you make as a development partner, but most of all as a woman, to these young girls, such as the one referenced in Dr. Kamen's opening remarks, who stand the risk of dropping out of school because of COVID? You have 30 seconds each, please. I'll start with Phumzile.
Well, my commitment is that our Generation Equality platform, which is aiming at accelerating the implementation of SDGs, fighting the pandemic and closing the gaps that we identified from implementing the Beijing Declaration, I will make sure that girls are involved as leaders in their own right in addressing and implementing the activities that we have identified in Generation Equality. They have highlighted especially education, and they know their story. So I will make sure that the ideas that they've given to us, which will help them to remain at school, we implement. And I have Henrietta here to hold me accountable to that. We will implement their ideas in the girl group that we have in Generation Equality, in ending violence against women in schools, violence against girls. I will make sure that we have actions to address that. And of course, they are leading in climate change. I would make sure that we support them in their work in climate change. And in innovation and technology, Henrietta has said it all. So girls, all the way.
Henrietta?
Well, I like that. Girls all the way. So we'll stand right by Phumzile and Mari to make sure that every girl has a chance to stay in school. And life is long, that they have a chance to learn all during life and be real productive members of their communities and society. So we are all in for girls.
Thank you, Henrietta. Indeed, girls. Mary?
The World Bank is committed to the African Human Capital Agenda and will, with Phumzile and Henrietta, promote women and girls empowerment through the 4 E's: improve access to education, support women's employment and productivity, enhance access to health services, and create an enabling environment for their empowerment.
Thank you for those words of commitments. Indeed, investing in women and girls' empowerment is just smart economics. We are looking forward to continuing this important conversation. Please share your thoughts online using the hashtag #InvestInWomen.
Investments in human capital are key to bridging gaps in basic services that protect families from the impact of economic shocks and other crises. Across Africa, women constitute a tremendous untapped economic potential. If empowered, they can substantially contribute to the continent's economic transformation. Governments, regional institutions, and their partners can work together for women and girls to become innovators, entrepreneurs, and empowered citizens.
From Niger, we hear from a beneficiary of the Sahel Women's Empowerment and Demographic Dividend Project, the SWED. And from Ghana, DJ Switch has a special message for us.
Lokolo jin ko yalla sabu lokolo ingano na aiwani français histoire géo ngamo na halka sun aiwani chawyan aiwani hantumiya aite sai ai du boryan kan gogai ga ai mai chawote ya dinga ai muhimmadan ka chawgo tonto ai makani irdo borai mun makani.
La tradition de la vache chrétienne fait grandir les liens entre nous. Si tu éprouves vraiment de l'amitié
hantumiyan inganda chawya harno kan ganda gabi ma ai woga ne ya danga kutte gaga sinowo ingono nan ai won ga chawgu mo wono nan ai go sintinai boraira dai fullo kol goye kan ai ciaran se banda ai ga tirai sambu ga chawyanti ai mai kan yai sambu ai muka bira ga dondon matkan iga hantumateda hantumiyan asfala wadin sai nai goga himmadan kai chawyan wote chawyan inganda hantumen atila sinohin kuna dinga bani idunya gora mu bori ai sibakal da ai chaw gaba ai mfata doctor ai mir kwar borai safar ai miga ai bora kulga da labu kulu da ai yiji ai du ize ai ba ngai mum furla kol.
DJ Switch. With the sauce, with Jana, my sauce. Make it ball till we fall, make it ball till we fall. When I come with the sauce, with Jana, my sauce. The swag, that shit. I be getting fly on my chip, I see that, man. We just wanna get it, we don't want no trouble. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Investing in girls' education and health is essential for our future as strong and healthy women, mothers and providers of our families and communities. Giving girls the opportunities to stay in school and graduate and develop our careers allows us to start a family when we are ready and raise kids that are healthy, well-nourished, and better educated. We are girls and we are strong. Empower us to realize our full potential. And yes, contribute to our country's economic growth. Switch up.
I'm now delighted to introduce you to our next distinguished guest. A warm welcome to Dr. David Moina Singh. He is the Minister for Basic and Senior Secondary Education in Sierra Leone and a champion for keeping young people engaged and in school. Welcome, David. We also have Jaha Dukure, who is human rights activist and founder of Safe Hands for Girls, a non-profit grassroots organization working to protect young women and girls who are at risk of female genital mutilation. Thanks for being here, Jaha. And finally, Soukaina Khan, who is the World Bank Country Director for Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Chad. Welcome, Soukaina. Nice to have you all here today. David, one of the defining features of the impact of COVID in education is differential impact on the most marginalized, especially girls who we know from the Ebola crisis drop out of school for varying reasons, including child marriage and pregnancy. What practical solutions from your context in Sierra Leone and learning from Ebola do you implement to ensure that girls in particular are able to continue to access school during remote learning so they are not left behind and their school education not disrupted, perhaps forever?
Thank you very much. I do think one of the things we've learned, not just during Ebola, but we've seen that as well during COVID, is that girls, and in particular, rural poor girls, are the most marginalized. And if you take any learning outcome and any educational variable metric, girls and those with disabilities, those in rural areas are the most marginalized. And there are multiple ways in which we can ensure that those girls and just all other girls who are at risk from pregnancy, from dropping out and not completing school are able to access and stay in school. One is policy. So we learned from Ebola, and in Sierra Leone, we overturned the ban on pregnant girls from attending school and taking exams. And now in Sierra Leone, we have hundreds who were able to transition and continue their education, even with pregnancy and after pregnancy. That required a cabinet decision and engagement with the lawmakers. A second one that we've been able to do is data. If you don't measure it, you won't know the problem. So we've been able to make our data systems gender responsive and particular disability responsive. And in all areas where it's in remote areas, we're able to know the specific demographic, socioeconomic of the children, of the teacher, so we can customize interventions. And the final one really is that solutions have to also be gender tailored. So for example, during COVID, there was a lot of remote learning and distance education where we focused on radio teaching program. We know that if there's one radio at home, they're likely not going to give it to the girl. So what we did was in remote areas, we provide radio specifically to girls, solar powered radio, such that those girls with our partners, Plan International and others, can be able to continue access to education. And recently, with the First Lady, who put together a hygiene kit, a wellness kit that includes sanitary hygiene pads and other conversations around sexual and gender-based violence that those girls should be having, and will continue to provide solar lights as well. So our educational programs, our support programs have to be gender specific and know that girls are often and most at risk.
Thank you, David. So it's really about gender-tailored program, access, equity, and data is critical, right? Jaha, your story and journey from your childhood to where you are now is incredibly inspiring. Now you are well known as an activist for women's rights and the first UN Women's Goodwill Ambassador for Africa. You were nominated for the Nobel Prize in 2018, as well as named Time's 100 most influential people in the world in 2016. However, before all these, you were subjected to female genital mutilation at 1 week old and forced into early marriage at the age of 15. And yet you did everything you could to go back to secondary school and later university and graduating. Why was graduating from school so important?
Thank you very much. I think for me, I always knew from a young age that the only way I can make a difference in my life and escape some of the violences and things that I've been subjected to is by being empowered myself. I think it's very, very important that as a continent and as a country that we understand that holding 50% of our population back is not going to bring any form of development in our country. And when coming back to Africa and doing the type of work that I do, one of the things that I've noticed is a lot of the issues that women are facing is because they've been marginalized. When you look at women in this continent, the kind of jobs that they do is petty trade and in markets, which is why for them, a lot of times they feel that they can't refuse the violences that they've been subjected to and they can't say no. So it's money is power. I think a lot of times people don't understand that and people don't see that. But if a woman can't have her own money to make her own decisions, she doesn't have a choice but to sit in certain situations. And for me personally, I knew that the only way I can escape my marriage, the only way I can protect my daughter from not being subjected to the things that I've been subjected to is if I'm able to go back to school and be somebody for myself rather than being dependent on my husband, being always dependent on my father, being always dependent on my brothers. Because I was raised in a way where I was told that a woman's place is in the kitchen. But by going back to school, I was able to take control of my own life. And not only that, but make a difference in my community, make a difference in the lives of millions of girls around the continent of Africa, as well as around the world. Women who have been subjected to female genital mutilation and child marriage. One thing that we need to understand is I represent their voice. A lot of them don't have the same platforms that I do. A lot of them don't have the same voice that I do. So when I get out there, when I speak, I'm speaking on behalf of them, which is why personally, I think it's very important that we invest in girls. I think it's very important that from a young age, women understand that we need to build their agency and we need to build their capacity and they need to contribute to society, whether it's policy, whether it's other things that communities need, and they need to be part of those decisions. So that's why it was important for me to go back to school and graduate, as a matter of fact.
Thank you, Jaha. As you said, you said it all. It's about education, it's about access, but it's also about economic empowerment, financial autonomy.
Exactly.
Sukaina, the Sahel region faces many challenges such as political instability, insecurity, climate change, and now the COVID-19 pandemic. There are reports of thousands of schools being closed because of threats of militants, and now the pandemic has disrupted school attendance, which means more girls dropping out of school and exposed to violence and poverty. As the country director of the World Bank for Mali, Burkina Faso, Chad, and Niger, could you tell us how your work daily is really how you work daily to meet the challenges and provide specific support to girls to reduce gender-based violence and ensure that they are able to complete their education and graduate from school?
Thank you. In the Sahel, the bank has adopted a multi-pronged approach. At the regional level, the bank has built on the Sahel Women Empowerment and Demographic Dividend Project, the so-called SWED, to make gender part of our daily business. I can illustrate with a couple of short examples. The SWED project intervenes to improve life skills, reproductive health, knowledge among adolescent girls and young women to keep girls in school, expand economic opportunities for adolescent and young women, and prevent gender-based violence by addressing its root causes. Over 3,400 safe spaces have been established where about 120,000 out-of-school girls are taught life skills and essential reproductive health knowledge, and in some cases, literacy and numeracy. One important aspect introduced by the second phase of SWED project is the enhanced attention to strengthen legal frameworks that promote women's rights to health and education. And SWED by engaging with policymakers, civil societies, religious leaders, contributes to change mindset. During the recent launch of the phase 2 of our project, there's a Minister of Economy who said, we're not making a favor to women. We're bringing women and youth forward as central actors for our country's development. And this is the kind of change in mindset that we're trying to achieve. So what I could say in a nutshell is that the bank is using all its instruments, whether it's analytical work, investment project like the SWED, or country partnership framework to engage in this very complex issue of gender inequality in the Sahel.
Thank you, Soukaina, for all your insight and for the wonderful and hard work you and your team do in this region. With just a few minutes left, one final question for each one of you. What one piece of advice would you give leaders across communities to ensure girls have the opportunity to stay in school and develop their careers? If you can quickly respond in 30 seconds, I'll first start with you, Jaha.
One advice that I would give our leaders is they need to realize the potential of girls, and they need to realize that women are not less. And once we give them opportunities, we're actually helping our countries move forward. We're building their human capital. We're building our nations. Like I said before, we cannot build nations wherein women are still being held back. So in order for us to change, in order for us to get out of poverty, we need to build the capacity of women. We need to give women the same opportunity that we've granted men. Girls going to school is not, should not be a privilege. It should be a right. And it's important that our leaders understand that. So I'm pleading with the leaders of the continent of Africa to realize that education for girls is not a privilege, but a right, and we should support them in order for us to get there.
David?
I'm very mindful about the fact that I'm a man and speaking about this. And so my advice to men and men leaders is really two things: empathy and dialogue. It's difficult to have empathy for teenage girl issues, perhaps, because dialogue does not happen for our male leaders, often with teenage girls. But I think a constant and sustained dialogue where we as leaders, where we as men, often with power, can have uncomfortable conversations about sex, about FGM, about pregnancy with girls will be most critical. So I think it's empathy and engagement and dialogue.
Thank you. Soukaina.
Look, there's one of the head of state in the Sahel region who said that a society cannot work like a person cannot work on one feet. So as long as the societies will not allow girls to fulfill their role, it's not only about social justice, but it's as well about economic development. So for leaders, I will just tell them to think about the social justice for girls, but as well the economic development of their own countries.
With that, we have now reached the end of a fascinating conversation. Thank you, Jaha, Soukaina, and David, for your thoughtful insights. We really appreciate it. We are looking forward to your audience joining this conversation on Twitter using the hashtag #InvestInGirls. Thank you all.
Hi, my name is Aida Sarai Ridihoff. I am the country director for Mozambique, Madagascar, Mauritius, Seychelles, and the Comoros. I believe wholeheartedly that without women's and girls' participation in the economic development, there can be no transition in the demographics that we see today. It is critical, and evidence is there, that in Sub-Saharan Africa, this is the limitation today. Girls' participation in education, in health, in the labor force we have to put as much effort as possible in reducing the inequality that we see today. Thank you.
I'm so excited that the World Bank has taken this on as a central development agenda item for the Africa region, and that's on girls and women's empowerment. This is so critical because at the core, it focuses on giving them voice and choice. And for example, in Mauritania, we are thrilled to be able to work with the authorities there on a multi-pronged approach to dealing with this issue. For example, actively engaging with religious leaders, almost 400 of them, in addressing this issue. In addition, through a range of activities that include supporting almost 11,000 girls to stay in school, giving economic opportunities for almost 2,000 girls, focusing on boys and helping them to understand the role and importance of girls and women. Over 1,000 boys that are targeted through these kinds of interventions. This is just a glimmer of the kinds of activities that our projects are engaged in. I myself am a product of the fact that my Ethiopian grandmother went to one of these community development meetings, and as a result of that, kept my father in school. And I'm so excited that I can work in an institution that supports this, and that I can work with client countries and stakeholders across the board in support of this agenda.
We would love to hear from you, so kindly share your thoughts using the hashtag #InvestInWomen. We will now turn our focus to women's economic empowerment. Over the past few decades, Sub-Saharan Africa has made considerable progress addressing a range of outcomes that are critical for women's empowerment, including legal reforms on the age of marriage and gender-based violence. Yet, key gender gaps remain, resulting in higher poverty rates and lower labor productivity. For example, while women's labor force participation has increased in the past 10 years, they perform a higher rate of low productivity work. Before I introduce you to our next guest, let us watch a story from Sierra Leone, where nearly half of the population live below the international poverty line of $1.90 per day. We will learn how investments in social safety nets can go a long way in supporting women and helping them out of poverty.
My name is Salima Tubangua. Nabonga Fabon. I'll be there, I'll be joining the program. I don't be getting nothing. But upon this fish business, I'll be there, drag. I don't go now, waff, them fishermen, they go trust me. I want to come on sell. I can't pay. The profits, I they put small, I keep them. The other, I they eat, I they give lunch to me, picking them, pay school fee. Say this program can meet winner, I begin buy for myself now, not the trust again. I able to take care of me picking there for going to school. So I'm happy for that. Don't get the well body first with the long life with me picking there. So happy for that. Now they make her happy always. Now you can help me this problem where me house be born. Say, I get for try, I build this house. Because of me picking the try, they sleep angry. Not all time they put pots in a fire. But now, every day they put pots in a fire. Me picking the way they come on, go school, where they come on school, they meet rest in a house.
It is now my pleasure to introduce our next guest, Dr. Anita Asimwe. She is the Director General of the Rwanda National Child Development Agency and the Rwanda Human Capital Focal Point. Dr. Asimwe has also been the Minister of State in charge of public health and primary health care for the government of Rwanda in a previous capacity. Thank you for joining us today, Anita. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
So thank you for joining this discussion on women's economic empowerment. I'm really looking forward to talking to you about this. Women's economic empowerment is one of the game changers on the continent of Africa and for the Africa Human Capital Plan, which is focused on accelerating more and better investments in people for greater equity and economic growth. The Rwandan government continues to make efforts in increasing its human capital through improved health, education, and economic opportunities for women and girls, all elements that increase the country's economic growth and prosperity. From your perspective as the Human Capital Focal Point in Rwanda, what lessons can we draw from Rwandan policymakers, particularly now with the COVID pandemic, in ensuring that investments in Africa's human capital are sustained and protected so that we save lives and livelihoods, promote well-being, and safeguard future productivity, especially for women and girls? Over to you.
Thank you, Edith. And I'll put this in about 4 areas. And the very first area I would like to share is an area that we are very grateful for because the leadership of our nation has, over the years, very intentionally invested and made sure to put effort into gender equality. And this has helped us over the years to ensure that we have women and girls participate at different levels of decision making. Mentioning this, I would like to share that Rwanda is among the topmost countries in this world that have highest representation of women in parliament, in cabinet, and also we have quite good representation in other decision and making levels. This doesn't stay there because in a way it's translated into normal life. So this is very important and it has been a backbone for our success in terms of involvement of the woman and the girl in life in general. And the second area that I would like to touch is the fact that there's been a lot of investment over the years that is helping to ensure that the woman is empowered in terms of decision-making, but also empowered economically. This is still a journey growing. We still have a long journey on this, but we very much appreciate where we are and where we are coming from. This is very much, we are seeing it even much more now, given that the COVID pandemic is affecting many areas and impacting, of course, the economy of the women, just like it's impacting the economy of all other members of the society. But the fact that we had an investment over the time, it is helping to ensure that women can still continue to go by with their lives. And as I said, it's still a journey that has many miles ahead of us, but a journey that we see that we are on the right track. So this said, of course, and with the impact of COVID to the economy, with a woman empowered, it helps that those resources that are reducing, then this woman who is empowered and can make decisions, they can save for what is most important. And here, when I talk most important, I mean most important for the well-being of the family, most especially the well-being of the children who are still growing and who for sure are the backbone for the human capital development of our nation. Still continuing on investment, I look at the investments that have been done in health and nutrition, but also in education for the population at large, but specifically for women and girls. There's been a lot of improvement in this area, with a lot of emphasis of improving the involvement of the girl child and ensuring we don't leave the girl child out. There have been a number of initiatives our leadership has taken part into. Here I can mention just a few. For example, the Generation Unlimited, the Giga Initiative, the Smart Africa. This helps ensure that the digital dividend is decreased. And that way it also includes the girl and the woman. This helps ensure that the woman can also benefit from the growing advantages of using technology, and that helps prepare them, but also make them relevant for the job market. So a number of things going on there that really come back to the investment that our government has intentionally put into ensuring that the environment is good for the woman and the girl. Still talking about the girl and linking this to human capital development, if I use the example of nurturing and caring for the child, it is very important that the girl is empowered earlier on, because that helps them make decisions for their lives, but also for the lives of the families that they will have in future. Because when you wait and start when they're already a woman, then you're kind of running a little bit late, and also empowering them ahead of time gives them that leeway to be able to decide way ahead, and also once they have a family to be saying, this is how best we are going to be spending the resources of the family. And again, bearing in mind the importance of investing early in life for a child, because this has long-time life consequences, not just for that child, but for the family, for the community, and then, of course, for the nation at large. And then finally is how we have been walking this journey and working very closely with multiple stakeholders, multiple partners who have been with us on this journey. This is something we put in effort to. A lot of investment coming in, as I mentioned, for health, but also education, and then, of course, women empowerment. So that collaboration and working with various partners is also very important, and one that we have intentionally, as a government, put effort into.
Oh, thank you so much, Anita. This is, again, really interesting. And now you're making me think about agency and the Rwandan woman and her ability to, really utilize her agency to access opportunity. You mentioned the highest representation in parliament, that Rwanda holds that record for the highest number of women in parliament. I think it's one thing to provide the opportunities. It's another thing for women to actually be exercising their agency to seize these opportunities. Tell us about the typical Rwandan woman, this entrepreneur, this woman who is, using technology, who has pivoted in a time like this that is difficult for most, to be able to continue to provide for her family using digital technology to provide education services, health services, etc. Tell us a little bit more about the Rwandan woman and the investments that have been made that have allowed these women to exercise their agency in the way that you're describing.
Yeah. So if I just look at a typical Rwandan woman in this era, again, an era where the investment in making sure that you can use technology and also be free with it, play around with it, has helped a lot. I recognize that when it comes, a lot of effort has been done indeed in gender equality, but we also appreciate that the environment is still, given that this takes years, there's still that patriarchy society and all that. But with the woman empowered, a woman empowered either all the way from when they were encouraged as a girl to go to school, not shy away from science and technology, and mathematics subjects and leave it only just to their brothers, but be able to also approach that area. This starting early enough, we are seeing many more girls being able to join the STEM, but also the girl understanding that they also have a say, and also knowing how to, if I may, maneuver that patriarchal environment and society. In that way, they are able to contribute and make decisions. So a typical woman who has that background and also knows how to go about that environment will be able to use their skills that they have acquired to, in the house, be able to, first they have access to their resources because they have learned how to use their phone to withdraw resources from their accounts. They have learned how to use their phone to purchase, even if it means grocery from not far from home. They have learned how to use their phone to call on a motorbike rider to bring their food home, and so on and so forth. But very importantly, they have learned how to talk to their partner at home on what is most important to purchase when you're making sure that you're saving for the house. What is that is most important given? Let me take the example, the children in the house that we need to take care of. So there is a component of the access, there is a component of being empowered to negotiate, and then there is a component of being able to use it and feel comfortable with it. So all this put together, it helps the woman to be able to continue juggling life with those basic tools, but tools that otherwise would not be there if it wasn't for all the efforts in place backed up by government for these to intentionally happen.
Gosh, thank you so much. This is fascinating. I actually remember maybe a couple of decades ago now when Rwanda set up this STEM institution of learning. I think it might have been targeting girls, but there was, it was a leader in that regard. And this was, more than a couple of decades ago, around 2 decades ago. So there's certainly a lot we can learn from Rwanda as well as other parts of the world, of course. But I think on the continent, Rwanda has certainly been leading the charge in this regard. And I'm glad you've been able to share some of what you've been doing with us today. Before we leave, on a personal level, I'd like to hear from you. I have one last question that I'd like to hear from you. There are a lot of young women, girls listening to this conversation today. What words of encouragement would you give to them to help them, understand that there are pathways for them to be able to to be able to access opportunity or to be able to continue to prosper? Please share with us what you would like to pass along to these young women and girls.
Yeah, I would really, what quickly comes to mind would be that it's very important they believe in themselves, because they have what it takes to get to what they would like, most especially if they believe in themselves. And also very importantly, to make use of what is readily available for them to be able to get even further. And do not allow anyone to tell you that you cannot because you're a girl. Even if you're the first in your family, let's say, to go to school. I know there are still countries where the girl getting girl children to school is still being advocated for, and a lot of effort. So we still even have in a generation where in some places a girl might be the first one going to school in their families. So even in such a situation, I would very much encourage that first they believe in themselves, but also appreciate and take, I would say, make use of what you have in your surrounding, and so propel yourself and even get further.
Thank you so much, Anita. Great words of encouragement, very inspiring. I believe you are a true role model to many of these young girls who will be listening. They'll probably start following you on Twitter, so watch out. With that, we have now reached the end of this empowering discussion. Thank you so much, Anita. We're looking forward to continuing this important conversation online and with your networks. For those of you watching, please let us know your thoughts on Twitter using the hashtag #InvestInPeople. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edith.
Investments in human capital are key to unlocking a child potential and improving economic growth in every country around the world. The World Bank is committed to supporting African countries in their efforts to empower girls, including through continued access to quality education.
Thank you, Marie-Francoise, and welcome back to all our viewers. Again, I am Edith Jabuno, Manager for External Affairs at the World Bank for the Eastern and Southern Africa region. We are coming to the end of our event today, but one more very critical stop with some of the key people who shape what happens here at the World Bank. We think it is important to hear from our senior management here at the bank why the issue of investing in women and girls is fundamental to realizing the continent's human capital potential and spurring sustainable economic growth. Without further ado, let me introduce our distinguished panelists, all of whom are strong advocates and champions for investing in women and girls' education, health, and economic opportunities. A very warm welcome to Mamta Muti, who is the Vice President for Human Development here at the World Bank and oversees the Human Capital Project, an initiative I know you are very passionate about, Mamta, and which is aimed at accelerating more and better investments in people for greater equity and economic growth. Thank you, Mamta, for being here. We also have Hafez Gano, Regional Vice President for Eastern and Southern Africa at the World Bank, a man I know to be a feminist and a fierce advocate for girls' education and women economic empowerment. Welcome to you, Hafez. We also have Usman Diagana, Regional Vice President for Western and Central Africa at the World Bank, also a strong advocate for gender equality and giving voice and agency to women and girls. Welcome, Usman, and thank you for being here today. Finally, welcome to Pablo Fajnizilba, who just this week took up the reins as World Bank Acting Vice President for Infrastructure. Congrats and welcome, Pablo. Before I kick off with questions, I want to encourage our viewers to join the conversation online using the hashtag #InvestInWomen, as well as #InvestInGirls. Also share your thoughts by responding to our poll question, which has been up for a few days now across our social media platforms. If you haven't responded, it's also on our event page on World Bank Live. Our poll question is, which of the 4 options provided in the poll will be the most important to ensure full participation and inclusion of women and girls for economic growth in Sub-Saharan Africa? The 4 options provided are protections from gender-based violence, access to healthcare, access to education, and high productivity jobs. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list. We will bring you the results of the poll at the end of this event, so stay tuned. So let me begin with my first set of questions with you, Mamta. We have heard during the course of today's program why it's critical for women and girls to be front and center in COVID relief and recovery efforts. I believe that point has come through from all our brilliant speakers today. However, is women and girls empowerment just a matter of investing in what's usually called, the areas that are usually called social sectors or human development sectors of health, education, social protection, or is a whole of government strategy critical? Over to you, Mamta.
Thank you, Edith, for this very important question. And hello to everybody who's watching this. Investing in girls is a whole of society, whole of government effort and cannot be confined to a few areas. That being said, in the Africa region, we're focusing on 4 key outcomes. We call them the 4 E's. It's educating girls, it's enhancing access to reproductive and health services, it's supporting employment of women and girls, and it's empowering women and girls. In fact, the fourth E I would regard as the most important. Now, while we focus on these four outcomes, achieving these four outcomes is not something which is a matter of for the Ministry of Labor or the Ministry of Education or the Ministry of Health. In fact, it requires a partnership across ministries, across levels of government, with families, with communities, with the private sector to achieve. And that's what the Human Capital Project is about. It's trying to galvanize an effort around this whole of society approach. Let me give a very simple example, starting with education. We all know that education has been severely affected, and many women and girls are out of school because of COVID-19. But even before COVID-19, getting every girl into school was a challenge. Let's think about why that is. First of all, schools need to be accessible. So there needs to be a school which can be reached through an all-weather road. The school needs electricity. Ideally, it should have a digital and internet connection. It needs water and sanitation, particularly if girls need to be encouraged to stay in secondary school. That's on the supply side, as economists like to call it. On the demand side, the family of the girl needs to want to send the girl to school. This can require a community effort. Sometimes girls need to go to work, and so providing a stipend can encourage the girl to go to school and encourage the girl's family to send the girl to school. In fact, under the SWED projects that we have in the Africa region, which started out in the Sahel, this is exactly what we support. In addition to that, we need resources. Very often resources are collected at the federal level. They need to reach the local level at the right time and with regularity in order for the school to function and for the girl to receive her stipend. So I think this gives you, through this very simple example, I hope I've given you a sense of how everything needs to come together in order to achieve what sounds like a simple outcome, which is keeping girls in school.
Thank you very much, Mamta. And you remind me of the African adage, it takes a village. That is now a global adage. So it's not just government, clearly it's society, whole of society, whole of government. And thank you for sharing the 4 E's with us. Let me turn to you, Hafez. Investing in women and girls is a key building block for sustainable recovery from this current COVID crisis. But is this only about financing and scaling up financing, or is it also about changing policies?
Thank you very much, Edith, and good morning to everybody, or good afternoon for those in Africa. Let me take a step back for a second and just remind everybody why we are so interested in ensuring that girls and women in Africa are empowered, especially at this time as we are trying to get out of this COVID-induced recession. All our estimates show that if we can empower women in Africa, we can increase African GDP by anything from 5 to 15%. That is very, very important, an increase in income and increase in growth. And why does that happen? It happens because today, all our African women are working. Women's labor force participation in Africa is similar to that of men. Yet, women do not have access to the same resources as men. And as a result, so they don't have access to financing, they don't have access to quality land, they don't have access to quality education, and as a result, their productivity is lower. So we calculate if we can provide women with all that access so that their productivity is at the same level as the productivity of men, then we get this big boost in growth in our countries. So how do we bring that productivity around? That we need to invest in women, we invest in education. Mamta gave a great example of what needs to be done to bring girls to school, which is very important. But we also need to change policies and practices. So we need to address the conditions that the girls and women are facing in our region. So as the first generation of human capital development policy operations that we have been putting in place, we are trying to support systemic reforms to remedy historical discrimination in legal systems and try to eliminate harmful social norms. What do that disadvantage women? What do I mean by that? I mean, for example, laws that do not give women same access to financing, to laws that exclude women from the financial sector, laws that do not provide women and girls with the same level of protection, laws against gender-based violence, laws against female genital mutilation, and very importantly, laws against child marriage. It is very important to stop child marriage and to make sure that our girls stay in school and complete their education. So the COVID-19 pandemic now is a really urgent call for action for areas to safeguard girls' education, reduce the disruption that they're facing now, and address gender-based violence and protecting women's livelihoods and economic inclusion. We have to remember also that women have been more impacted in general than men by the COVID crisis, because, as I said earlier, women have been are mostly working in low productivity areas in the informal sectors, and those are the sectors that were most impacted by the crisis. We at the bank have been supporting many of those kinds of reforms that protect women and girls, especially. A good example of that is the work that we are doing in Madagascar, where many of the reforms there to ensure gender equality and women and girls' access to inputs are being placed. So this is what we need to do. In most of our countries, we need to change social norms, but social norms takes time to change, but we need also to change the legal system, laws and regulations, and that we can do right away. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hafez. Very important point you've raised here, and especially the point about this not just being, the moral right thing to do, but because it impacts economic productivity. So this is good for everyone. Investing in girls is good for everyone, and addressing those harmful social norms you listed is absolutely the right thing to do, but is also the healthy thing to do for the economic viability of our countries. So thank you for that. Usman, I'm coming next to you. The challenge ahead is tremendous and will require investment at scale. Women and girls in Africa aren't just held back by lack of financing or flawed or outdated policies, but also by these harmful cultural and societal gender norms that Hafez was just speaking about. To what extent do you think these can be influenced?
No, thanks very much, Edith, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I'm very pleased to share this panel with esteemed colleagues, everyone known as a champion for girls and women empowerment. And this is what we need because, as we have said, socioeconomic constraint and long-standing development challenges and also outdated policy continue to play a significant role in hindering the highest potential women and girls can reach. And empowerment of women and girls in Africa is even more critical in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has exacerbated existing gender inequality across the region that are a result of many of these deep-rooted challenges that we see on the continent. And during crises that lead to school closure and curtailed economic opportunity, an increase in child marriage, teenage pregnancies, school dropout that affect essentially girls, and also gender-based violence can be observed. So within any given context, women and girls face diverse challenges and advantages, and therefore have different barrier and opportunity in terms of exercising choice and voice and shifting power relation, creating an enabling environment through legislative and policy reform, as Hafez has just mentioned, should be paired with support for community to adapt and change behavior. Behavior change and advocacy should also be a focus of our support by mobilizing specific agents of change at national, regional, and local level who could influence binding constraints related to the development challenges that we know on the continent and thus accelerate a result quickly. So our efforts should also, I think, include intervention addressing men and boys as critical contributors or barrier to the empowerment of women and girls. Men's and boy attitudes and action matter, given the key role they play as father, partners, peers, and community leaders within the private and public spheres of women and girls' life. So we do have in the region the Sahel Women Empowerment and Demographic Dividend Project, which is a flagship example of collaboration with partners and multi-sectoral intervention that aim to address many of the challenges that have kept the women and girls in the situation that we have already described. Intervention aimed at expanding the economic opportunity available to adolescent girls and young women will strengthen their employability and increase their access to funding. We also believe that providing space for girls, for boys as future husbands could also be very strong tools actually to help address these challenges that we have mentioned. And in those space, having also workshop on topics such as sexual and reproductive health, nutrition, self-esteem, and problem solving will promote healthy gender dynamics and will increase demand for services. So let me stop here. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Usman. I really like what you said. Men and boys' attitudes matter. I almost want to frame that. I think that's a really important point that must not be forgotten. The attitudes of men and boys in this discussion also matter for many of the changes we're talking about that need to happen. So thank you again. Pablo, can I turn to you? We surely can't have this discussion without talking about our digitized world. From a digital economy to digital communications, this is now the reality of the world we live in. Recognizing that digital infrastructure is fundamental to economic growth, how do you see digital technology as a game changer for women and girls' empowerment?
Thank you, Edith, and hello, everyone. Hello, colleagues in Africa. Good afternoon. Listen, as Mamta said, it is everybody's business. The agenda of women empowerment, of girls empowerment, the challenge of really boosting human capital, it's everyone's business. It requires a whole of government approach. And infrastructure has to be part of that. And I will say you're absolutely right. Digital is a very important part of that. And we are working on linking what we do on digital development and what we do on human capital, on girls empowerment. I think we've all seen during the pandemic the importance that being connected through digital has had. It has allowed people to stay connected. It has allowed businesses to keep running. It has allowed governments to continue providing services. It has allowed kids to remain engaged in schooling, even if maybe not in an optimal way. It has played a very important role. So it is very clear to us that going forward, digital will continue to be a very important game changer. I think you use the right words for specifically the human capital agenda and the girls and women empowerment agenda. That said, it's clear that with this potential also come risks. And I think the most important risk is the risk of exclusion, the risk of digital exclusion in this case, the risk that all of this potential is realized only for part of our societies. So for us, it is really critical to make sure that we close the digital gaps. Globally, 4 billion people still don't have access to the broadband internet. In Africa, the challenge is even greater. And this has been a great priority for Hafez, for Usman, and I think we're making progress on it. However, it is important to make sure that when we do that, we pay special attention to bringing the internet to everybody, but especially to women who have less access than men. And that has very negative implications, because this means that all the services that are provided through digital means, women and girls have less access to digital financial services, less access to IDs that are the gateway to get many government benefits, less access to jobs in ICT. So this is really a very important agenda, to close the digital divide in access to digital infrastructure. Now, I want to say, if you allow me, that beyond closing that gap, it is really important that in parallel, we continue bringing digital innovation, digital technologies in the design of the interventions that aim at empowering women and girls, that aim at boosting human capital. Those digital aspects of those interventions, they allow for improving the efficiency of the interventions. They allow for reaching more people, more girls, more women. They also allow for improving the targeting, for making sure that no vulnerable household is excluded from those programs. By increasing efficiency, they also improve affordability of many of these services. So it is really important. Now, the good news is that we're already doing it, right? And we're advocating for others to do the same, to really bring these innovations into the programs that we implement aimed at boosting human capital. We're collecting evidence on what works. As we go, we try to identify what are the most successful approaches so that we can scale them up, so that we can replicate them. So I will say we're using this approach against many of the challenges that have been mentioned today, in programs against gender-based violence, in programs to increase the demand to maternal and child health, in programs to develop the skills of women and girls and improve their economic inclusion. So I think digital is fundamental across the board in this area. And I want to finish by mentioning a concrete example that illustrates this. It's the example of cash transfers. And we're having very innovative programs, and I want to talk about Nigeria in particular, that take into account these attitudes, these social norms, and in order to reach the most vulnerable populations and really empower them. In Nigeria, the program that I want to mention is the Nigeria Household Uplifting Program. This is under the social safety net, the National Social Safety Net Project. And what we have done there, I mean, what Nigeria has done there, and we've been happy to be part of it, is they've introduced a digital system to reach vulnerable households, to provide them with transfer, and specifically to reach women. This has been piloted and it has been tweaked to be as successful as possible. Now it's present in 34 states of Nigeria. It's currently reaching 3.2 million women. So on our side, we are fully committed to working with our colleagues in the Africa region, to working with our colleagues who in the area of human development to really boost human capital, leveraging these innovations. Thank you so much, Edith, again, for this question. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Pablo, and particularly for raising the alarm about the risk of digital exclusion, and for talking about some of the work that we're doing in the World Bank to ensure digital equity, which leads to better economic inclusion of women. So thank you for sharing that with us. I'm actually hearing that we're generating a lot of engagement on social media. So thank you all to our viewers watching online. Thank you for joining this conversation. I believe this is a good time for us to bring in some of our pre-recorded questions from audience members. Let's listen to the question from Sheila Ayebere, founder of Girl Aid in Uganda. Can we play Sheila's video?
In times of crisis, the inequalities faced by women and girls are magnified. Therefore, the COVID-19 pandemic has worsened these inequalities, leading to a tremendous challenge ahead that will require investment at scale. Is the World Bank ready to mobilize resources commensurate with the needs of women and girls across the African continent?
Thank you to Sheila for sending in that question. So Usman, perhaps I'll turn to you for a response. She asked if the World Bank is ready to mobilize the resources for investments that will match the needs of women and girls in Africa, especially considering these adverse impacts brought on by the COVID pandemic. Usman?
No, thank you very much, Edith. Indeed, thanks to Sheila for this question, which tie into my previous response, where it is clear that enhanced equality in society and under the law, including freedom from all sorts of violence, is critical to create an enabling environment conducive to female agency and empowerment. We have greatly increased our financing for a project championing women and girls in the last fiscal year, with over 2.2 billion of new financing in the region since the launch of Africa Human Capital Plan in 2019, and expect to step up even more this fiscal year. And as many of us in this room have said, you know, women empowerment, women and girls access to education, to services, remain front and center of our strategy and whatever we'll be doing as an institution, and certainly in Africa. At the same time, we require that collaboration and partnership at the country and global level is also very critical to making change happen. So we will also work closely with government and development partner, with civil society, with youth, as well as use our convening platform to make transformational impact with gender intervention and with a full participation of women and girls in the policy discussion, policy and the program design. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Usman. Really well said. I'm going to take another video question from Kelvin Adanchede. He's the president of Youth Transforming Africa in Benin. Can we have Kevin's video?
Bonjour, mon nom est Kelvin Adanchede du Bénin. Je suis persuadé que pour investir dans les femmes et les filles, il faut changer les politiques.
I am convinced that to invest in the women and women, we have to change the policies. So what can the World Bank do in order to leave no one behind when it comes to girls and women?
Thank you to Kelvin. I'll do a quick translation for those who may not have seen the English transcript. Kelvin asked, I am sure that investing in women and girls is also about changing policies. What is the World Bank doing to make sure that no woman or girl is left behind? And we've talked a little bit about this, but Mamta, maybe I'll direct that to you.
Thank you, Edith. And I want to thank Kelvin in absentia for his question. I believe both Hafez and Osman spoke about this aspect already, and let me elaborate. In order to support women and girls, it's extremely important to have an enabling environment, and that consists of the right laws and regulations. It also consists of societal norms that support women and girls, and it also consists of investments. Now, on the laws and regulations, on the policy environment, as we call it, the World Bank does a lot of work. We collect a lot of evidence about the kinds of laws and regulations that support women. We make this evidence base available to governments so that they can design their own laws and regulations. And then we support these legal and regulatory changes that can influence women and girls. Now, I would say that these legal and regulatory changes, they're necessary, but they're not sufficient. If you like, they create the environment, but that needs to be carried forward with community engagement and with investment. But just on those legal and regulatory changes, let me give 3 examples which illustrate the kinds of policy changes that we are supporting. The first example I'd like to give is the one that Hafez gave already, which is Niger, where we have supported the abandonment of child marriage. So we've supported policies that actually bring an end to child marriage, which is very pernicious, and it means that girls cannot invest in their education and plan their families. The second policy change I'd like to talk about has to do with gender-based violence, which we have seen a huge increase in during the pandemic, although it's endemic to many societies. Here, I'd like to give the example of Madagascar, where we have supported the measures to both prosecute and to prevent gender-based violence. The final example I'd like to give goes to the point that Pablo was making around the digital divide and the need to provide digital opportunities to women. Here, I'd like to give the example of Senegal, where we have supported universal service provision laws, which make internet service providers develop plans and strategies as they roll out digital connections to close the digital divide and make sure that their facilities are available to women and girls. So there are a number of areas, and I hope that these three examples give you a concrete sense of the kinds of policies the World Bank is supporting.
Thank you, Mamta, and certainly they do. Perhaps I'll try to take one more question we received from our online audience and address this to both Hafez and Pablo by way of closing. So to you both, could you in one sentence define for us what success on this agenda on women and girls empowerment looks like? Hafez, I'll go to you first.
Well, thank you, Edith. This is a very good question because we need to know what we are aiming for. I think success would look like, first of all, girls staying at school and completing education, especially all the way to secondary education. Success would look like girls and women participating more and more effectively in our economies and contributing to economic growth and development. Success would look like the end of child marriage, and that will lead also to the demographic transition and to Africa getting the benefits from the demographic dividends. Success ultimately would look like a better life for men and women, because women's empowerment and girls' empowerment would lead to better economic life, to better development, and it is beneficial to men and boys as well as to women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hafez. I really like those success measures, certainly goals for us to all strive for. Pablo, over to you.
Thank you, Edith. Listen, I think success is girls and women being able to achieve their full potential in life. And that has many components. That means that they have health, that they are safe from violence, that they have access to schooling that can improve their potential in the labor market, that they are economically included, that they have decision-making over their resources, and that they can access high productivity jobs that allow them to have, a full life. I will also say that for those who during crisis, during shocks, are suffering because they have lost their jobs or their sources of income, success is also that those women, those girls are supported through safety nets. So access to all of this, I think, will be full success in this case. Thank you, Edith.
Thank you so much. Access and equitable access is certainly the key. So thank you for sharing that with us. All right, I think we've got our charge. We have a lot of work to do. Thank you, Mamta, Hafez, Usman, and Pablo, for all the time you've spent with us today, as well as your dedication to this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Edith. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Edith, Naye, and colleagues. Good to see you, Mamta, Hafez, and Pablo. All the best.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Merci.
We will continue to engage with all of you watching on social media using the hashtags Invest in Women and Invest in Girls. Naye, I must tell you, this event has been teachable on so many levels, at least for me, and I hope for our viewers also. We've covered a lot here and learned a lot, and I'm really hoping the conversation will go on, aren't you?
Yes, Edith, but we are not done. Don't you have some poll results to share with us?
Yes, in fact, I do. Drum roll, please. We had over 17,000 votes come in answer to the poll that we put out several days ago. And these votes came in on Twitter, on YouTube, and on Instagram, of course, in English and French. Just to share with you, the 4 areas that we asked for that we asked people to choose from as most important were access to education, access to healthcare, high productivity jobs, and protection from gender-based violence. And at the very top of that list, at 41%, was access to education. I'm so thrilled. But of course, as I said earlier, this is not an exhaustive list. There are obviously a lot of other areas that people even flagged to us that they thought would be important in this conversation about what it's going to take to ensure the full participation of women and girls for economic growth in Sub-Saharan Africa. This was quite a spirited conversation online, and I'll share some examples of what people said. We heard from @Udo Kene that access to finance should also have been included as an option, as it is linked to women's economic empowerment in Africa. And I think this has come up in the course of the conversations we've had today. And we also heard from @Sekgobolati, who said, I was going to choose dignity, but it's not on the list. Amazing. You all have made great additions to the choices. And it is clear, Naye, that we have only scratched the surface in our review of all the measures that can and should be undertaken to ensure women and girls are empowered and not left behind.
Yes, this is so inspiring, Edith, so inspiring. So I can only say, all of you, to all the viewers, please continue to share your feedback using the hashtag #InvestInWomen. Edith, just any closing word? This was such an amazing event, such an inspiration.
I almost don't want it to end, but we do have to end because now we have a lot of work to do. So let me just thank all our viewers for tuning in and for all their contributions online, as well as the contributions from our panelists. Our event ends now, but the conversation continues online. Let's keep talking. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you so much for your commitment.
As you see me, I dey make a
I'm still living. It means God will make a way. Make you no cry. Keep moving.